So that last video was a little long. I probably should have cut it a little shorter. Here, let's talk about formatting the output, and then we'll get on towards the talking about the solution. So the output of this program is a little different from anything else that we've created. Here we want a table, a text table. Once you think about creating text tables, then it's not a big leap to think about creating HTML tables and such as that for formatting and creating dynamic web pages. So it's really good to think about how do you create tabular output. So once you've got your program to the point where if you run it like this with -seed of 1, it produces this output because now you're randomly selecting a value. So we've gone from a tuple that has the name of the exercise and a low and high to now we have the name of the exercise and then a concrete number that we actually have to do that we've selected. So we want this to be shown in columns like this: push-ups 56, sit-ups 88, but we don't want to personally have to make this output. That would really be not a lot of fun. It's a good exercise. I totally recommend that you go write your own to figure out how to do this. It's such a good skill, but when it comes down to it, it's much better to use someone else's code if they've already taken the time to write it and test it and release it. It just saves us so much time to be able to use modules. The Tabulate module is really fantastic, kind of like the pprint module where we import pprint from pprint. Here we're going to from tabulate import tabulate. It's a function that will take a list of tuples and create this for us. That's why I was pushing you to create this list of tuples, because that's what Tabulate wants. And so, wow, that's just really fantastic. Do you see how it created these separators, figured out the longest line here, it figured out the longest value for this column, and then did all the white space and all the lining up for us. It's just really, really handy. And if we read, the only thing that we're missing here are just the headers. Like we want it to say exercise and reps. So we read help tabulate. We see that the documentation's been written really nicely and that there's a headers option. And here is how we run it. So we have WAD. WAD is going to be this. Basically, it's this list of tuples. And we say tabulate that and use this for the headers. And the headers needs to have the same number of columns, obviously. So make sure that you do this correctly. But now we put exercise and reps at the top there. And that's a really nice looking output from our program. That's what we're trying to get, and I think you should use the Tabulate module for that. So let's talk for just a minute about handling bad data. There are a number of files here in the inputs directory inside the 19 WAD directory. We're using exercises, and then there's another one called silly exercises. If we look at that, just has some other, the idea is that you should have another good import file, file that you can test to make sure your program is really flexible and does what it's supposed to. But then it has a number of other files that would actually break the program. Probably. Maybe you've written it in a way that it won't, but I would encourage you to try using all of these bad files. So if for instance cat the inputs empty, we see it's a completely empty file. Like there's no data there at all. What will your program do if there's no data? Now we have to give it a file because we're using argparse to say that file, that argument needs to be a readable file. Well, an empty file counts as a readable text file. It's just there happens to be nothing in it. So what happens to your program when you get a file that is empty? And that will happen. For instance, maybe you're transferring data from an FTP site or over the internet in some way, and the transfer failed. Maybe the file never made it and it just got named as a file on your side and has 0 length, or maybe it got corrupted, like you were downloading some sort of a zip file and you only got the first half of the file and the last half is missing, and now you're unable to unzip it or do anything with it. So what will your program do given corrupted data or given incomplete data? There's another one that has the wrong headers. So I say wrong. It's exercises and reps, but you see that they've been capitalized. And I just honestly can't tell you how many times I've had to deal with input files like this where somebody's looking at it in Excel, and so they give the headers all kinds of names and put in new line characters inside of the column name, and that can totally mess up your parsing of the file. Or they put in lots of extra characters and formatting that I don't want to see when I'm parsing the file. So there's lots of examples here. There's an also example here where this is not parsable as an integer, nor is 5-50. Those are going to break your code. What happens if there's no value here at all? What happens if it's something like NA, which it doesn't have a dash in it? You have all kind of issues like this when you're dealing with real world data. So the idea here is that I'm pushing you to think about how could you write code that would handle all of these. So I'll show you a version that handles the well formatted data, and then I'll show you how to take that a little bit further to handle this poorly formatted data.